Welcome to Mind Mastery and Manifestation, the #1 podcast helping you rewire your mind to erase fear, unlock your greatest potential, and get the extraordinary relationships, businesses, and lives you've always wanted. We're your hosts, Dan Mendilow
and Sophie Kessner. Welcome back to the Mind Mastery and Manifestation podcast. I am so excited to be jamming with each of you today. We have a super special guest. Dan will actually not be on this episode today. Instead, I am bringing on someone that I've been following for quite a while now and really have just been massively inspired by their work and their message and what they are here to share. And I'm sure that you're going to find a lot of inspiration through what he has to say on this episode as well. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Steph Sipondos.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for having me here. It was really great.
I'm just so grateful to just have you sharing space and to be tuning in. I know it's obviously a big thing, especially with the message that you have to share. There's a lot that goes into it, especially in today's time.
Yeah, it's a big, we were just speaking about this a little bit earlier. It's a big topic, especially around, what does it mean to just be a really healthy human being and a healthy man in today's world?
Well, I'd love just for the audience that's not familiar with you or your work yet, like a short background and a little bit of an insight onto who you are and how you've really tuned into the work that you do today.
Yeah, of course. So really the core reason why I'm so enthralled in this work around unifying, creating healthy relationships in the world and really men understanding themselves and connecting to the core essence of their own masculinity, and also just cultivating and developing this greater sense of masculine feminine dynamics in the world is because for me it was a massive pain point in my own life for many different reasons. And so not only in my adult life but in my childhood as well, I felt very isolated and very detached from the world. I didn't feel understood as a kid, and there were reasons for that. And I grew up in a violent family, physically violent, emotionally abusive family, very volatile dynamic. And that caused me to really move away from the world and be me. And so hiding for so long, masking ourselves, and men, we're very good at doing this. Human beings are very good at doing this. We have these psychological protective strategies, these compensatory strategies or coping strategies that we have that we use as children to get us through, to help us actually physically and emotionally survive. Otherwise it would just be too overwhelming and the mind would collapse. And so it's great and they help. What we do is we attach and we take these coping strategies, which is what I did, and I brought them into my adulthood. And I was in a different environment and they didn't need to be there, but I perpetuated the same outcome because I was applying the same strategies to everything because that was my norm. That was what I was familiar with. And so it really caused distance and just tension and frustration and fighting and argument in relationship and isolation. I just perpetuated more isolation, which is what I experienced when I was a kid. And so once I really moved through all of that and became aware of that, and I hit rock bottom many times, and I was dragged across the face of rock bottom many times before I could actually really make some decisions around, okay, I need to do something different here because this is just way too painful and I'm becoming a glutton for punishment. And I'm sick of wearing this badge of honor saying, hey, look at me, I can take a lot of pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, whatever. And so when I made that decision to be different in relationship and look at my stuff and look at my shadow and look at my trauma that I had suppressed and all of that, when I really made those choices, I began to open up to what the possibility of having a healthy life was, with a healthy psyche and healthy relationships, congruency in relationships, openness, transparency, clear communication, free of shame, free of judgment, deepened compassion, empathy and connection and intimacy, being able to be seen and see others and be vulnerable and still carry courage and posture as a man. And I started combining all these elements and looking at who were the main male figures in my life, and many of them weren't healthy. And so I started just unpacking everything. And I just became fascinated by that. Like I really became fascinated by that to the point where, I don't want to say I'm obsessed with it, but it's just everything to me because it allows me to live a life of alignment and authenticity. Whereas before I was just living a fake life, appeasing others, living to other people's values, not really owning my stuff, taking responsibility for who I was. When I look at that, I didn't think that was A, being a good man, and B, being good at being a man. And so then I started deconstructing masculinity. And again, that's another rabbit hole. And sometimes people ask me, what's your definition of masculinity? And I mean, I have some definitions around it, and it's an evolving construct. It's not fixed at the moment. I can definitely provide a substance, and that the notion of that is really growing, especially as fast-paced as society is. So there's a little bit of why I am where I am today.
Yeah, I love it. So many layers
Yeah.
we can dive into here. Let's take it from this angle, because I know a big topic that's come up for a lot of my audience who tend to be a lot more female entrepreneurs, and really learning, especially in today's society where it's almost conditioned to start to operate from more of that masculine presence and more of that masculine structure, where oftentimes that feminine essence tends to get lost, and it tends to create a little bit of a ripple effect in our ability to connect in relationship and to have more intimate space where we can fully surrender and be in that feminine presence. And it feels like it's almost created conflict or confusion as well for a lot of the men who tend to be more masculine, not knowing how to really approach and be in that space where they can have somebody who feels safe being able to lean into their feminine and step out of their masculine.
Hey, Dan Mendilow here, and I hope you're getting so much out of this podcast already. Hopefully you started seeing some shifts in the way that you think, the way you show up, or changes in your life, and would love your help with one thing, because we're trying to get this out to as many people as possible to create as much change, evolution, to help people out as much as we possibly can. So what we'd love for you to do is go over to iTunes, give us some stars, give us a review, take a picture or a screenshot, and either email it to me, or you can throw it into an Insta story and tag me. You can also tag Sophie, but make sure I'm tagged on it, because then I will email you a meditation bundle. Now, I used to sell this, but here's what's included. 1 quick meditation to reduce stress. 1 is my favorite manifestation meditation. 1 will help you build instant confidence. And 1 will help you remove any anxiety, stress, tension, pain. It's called the instant healing technique for a reason, and you're gonna love it. So all you need to do is go to iTunes, give us some stars, give us a review, take a screenshot or a picture, email it to me, or pop it into an Insta story and tag me, tag Sophie too, and we'll send you all of those meditations as a thank you for helping us spread the word. All right, now back to the show.
It's an interesting dichotomy that we find ourselves in. And so there's a great deal of confusion around what does it mean to be a man in today's world. Men are confused. Men are scared to stand in their authority or assertiveness because they're scared that it will be perceived as violent or aberrant or oppressive or subjugating. And the reality is that there's been a dominance in masculinity, but also male expression, that men haven't known power without grace. They haven't known power with grace, and they haven't known power without subjugation. And so this term power is an interesting word. Many people I come across dislike the word power. They think it's oppressive and subjugating and controlling. And the reality is it's the meaning that we give it. And so the collective experience of men at large has been that men have been controlling. And so we have this association that we can't be assertive, because if we're being assertive in a healthy way, in other words, if we're clearly communicating our values, knowing where we stand, being in a physically structured posture, and really expressing our truth from a place of compassion and a place of knowing, a place of our knowing, certainty, in other words, clarity, because we've gone into ourselves and we carry self-awareness, that can be perceived as being authoritative. And so men then are starting to shun away from that, but they're losing a massive aspect of their masculinity, that the feminine polarity is really magnetized to and attracted to the healthy version, of course. And so this isn't blaming women in any capacity or blaming men. It's a byproduct of what we're creating for ourselves. Because if we keep pushing and pushing and pushing, for example, if there's unhealthy masculine posture in the world, the feminine's going to break and the feminine's going to push back at some point. And so we're seeing this internal and external tug of wars now in the world. And so women are saying, well, so many women come to me, so many of my clients come to me and say, I don't want to be in this masculine role anymore. I'm happy to be assertive and create and be an entrepreneur, and I love being that in the world. And there are times where I just want to come home and allow my man to lead, or allow the person that I'm with to be in their masculine. So I don't need to, because leadership is a masculine expressive trait. It's not exclusive to men. Women lead in their own way, men lead in their own way, but it's a masculine virtue. And so when a woman is leading in any capacity, she's in a masculine expression. Doesn't mean it's unhealthy. Women and men both carry masculine and feminine expression. And so there's this confusion around that as well. And so what we need to do is actually, there's two things that we really need to do. It's very, very simple. Embrace difference and embrace the similarities. That's it. That's actually, if it came down to anything, it's really, like, truly authentically embrace difference. Hey, yeah, guess what? We are different. Our brains work a little bit differently. Culturally, we've been exposed to things differently. Our physiology is differently. Our hormonal makeup is different. And we're also super similar. Can we embrace both? That's a starting point.
I love this. I love just leaning in even more around the relational aspect of this, especially for a lot of the people I know that are listening to this podcast are in the entrepreneurial space, and on both ends, both men and women who find themselves in that place of learning how to harmonize between their masculine and their feminine selves. And it almost creates in the experience that I've had with a lot of the clients that I've worked with, a disconnect in being able to really deepen relationship. And I see for a lot of women, there's almost like a fear around leaning fully into that feminine because they don't feel fully supported by real masculinity. There's a lot of unhealthy masculinity energy that goes out there, or a lot of feminine energy tends to be, the word that comes up is like hurt or a little bit scarred through that.
There's a collective wounding there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just a point as well, there is also really amazing healthy masculinity out there as well. Absolutely. And it's really important that we focus on that and we search for that. And it's really important that we also look for the healthy femininity that's out there too. And so my guidance around that is when a woman is really tentative and is feeling the collective wounding, but also her own individual wounding, is to definitely be aware of her own feelings and definitely be aware of what's happening within herself. And really, with absolute clarity, know what she wants in another human being and know what she wants in a relationship. And importantly, know what she wants to be, who she wants to be, and why she wants to be in a relationship. Because what that will do is it will filter. And yes, just letting you know, the possibility pool will definitely come down. That's a given. That's going to happen, right? So I know that's a bit of a shame, but guess what? At least you're not drawing from 1 million men that are definitely not in alignment with you, and maybe you're only drawing from 10,000 men. I'm just giving some arbitrary numbers here. Don't let that daunt you, because the quality of the pool that you're drawing from in terms of what you're looking for in a relationship, yes, will be less, but it'll be of high quality. So it's quality over quantity. And that's a really important point, but it begins with us. This is advice and for any human being, any sentient. It's irrelevant whether you're a man or a woman. But in this context, I really hear what you're saying. As women are developing in themselves and they're changing the way they are in the world, and there's so many factors for this. I mean, Esther Perel speaks this as well. We're talking about the new wave of sexualization. We're talking about contraception. We're talking about culture. We're talking about equity and right and access to resources. Hundreds of years ago, this wasn't there for women. And so there's so much that's been changing in the last couple of 100 years. And it's really leading to blending of masculinity and femininity within every human being. And we're almost becoming more robust in our masculine, feminine expression. And there's also, in my opinion, there's a deep revealing that comes from honoring who we are as men and as women. And this isn't to negate any of the other gender types that exist either, but let's just use a very simple binary gender for now, just to keep things not as complex. There's something really, really beautiful. I'm a purist at heart for some things. And there's something really beautiful about a man being in his healthy masculine, because most men would tend to have a stronger masculine core essence. Not always though. And there's nothing, again, that doesn't mean that they're hyper-feminized men in any capacity. And more women, when they're in their healthy flow, when they're in their healthy posturing, they'll be in a greater feminine posture. And so there's something to be said about that, the magnetic polarity that comes together through that. And again, that process is really, that comes down to every individual honoring themselves and knowing who they are, knowing what they want, knowing what they really want to be in the world. I mean, is a man holding himself back from the world and being super passive because he thinks there's no other way to be? Because if he's in the world and quote unquote loud, that he's being subjugating or controlling. And that's on him to say, hey, there is another way. I can be healthily assertive. I can be in my power and still be considerate and equitable in how I move through the world. Is a woman coming into the world saying, oh, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be a businesswoman because I'm too much in my masculine. And that's, well, hold on a second. There's nothing wrong with being, and we need that energy in the world. We need that feminine creativity and that feminine leadership in the world. Can you balance that? So many women come to me and say, I want to be this powerhouse in the business world. And in my intimate relationship, I really want to step into this feminine role. I really want to step into this, and they'll use this word. They will use this word. It's not my word. This submissive role. It doesn't mean they're being weak or they're adhering to the male gender as if they're superior in any capacity. It's got nothing to do with that. And this is the confusion that we have, right? It's actually saying, I want the masculine in my life outside of myself to lead. And in that leading, I feel safe. I feel connected. I feel I can be deeper expressive in my own feminine gifts. Now, that doesn't mean that they let go of everything and assume no responsibility for themselves. It's not about that. It doesn't mean that they're not able to take ownership or leadership of who they are. It just means that they're seeking for something that's actually quite natural to both men and women. And in addition to that, this is potentially the most important piece, is that we find this wholeness, this emerging wholeness within ourselves, not necessarily first and foremost, but primarily. And there's a difference. If we want others to take leadership and really guide us through life in certain areas of our lives, then we must have a capacity to do that for ourselves and acknowledge it, because that fortifies the wisdom of that experience. And so it's so super important. If a man comes up to me and says, you know, I want a woman that's able to nurture me and care for me and be compassionate to me, yet 23 hours of the day, he's talking to himself like he hates himself, it's going to be tough for him to attract that, but before that, to even notice it, because all his frame of reference is this negative self-talk that's judgmental and non-compassionate. How is he going to really embrace that elsewhere? Because that's his norm and familiar. He'll be looking for that. And so there has to be an element of self-ownership. It's a big part of what I teach, massive part of what I teach.
I love what you're diving in here. And just to give context to everyone dropping in, really the inspiration in wanting to address like the polarity between the masculine and the feminine, really talking about this sacred union and why this is so prevalent and so powerful, especially as a creative human being, is the influence that it has in our ability to show up in the world and be more fully expressed, and how it really creates this deep level of expansion where, in personal experience for myself, and I'm sure for you as well, Steph, it's been this process of really getting to know ourselves, really the potency that comes when we get to know ourselves through relationship.
Yes.
And how much more that deepens.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And that's been a big learning journey for me, is being more open and aware to what can I learn about myself through this unraveling in a relationship, whether it's really challenging and difficult and painful, or whether it's beautiful and flourishing. Wherever it is on the spectrum, there's value there. And so in my early years, I really, really struggled to get any value from relationship unless I perceived it to be, quote unquote, going well. And so anytime I would be in tension with a person, I would project and blame. And I would say it's their fault, or the relationship. I'd blame the relationship. I wouldn't take any responsibility for myself and ask myself this reoccurring pattern and theme. How am I contributing to that? How am I learning from that? How can I grow from this? And really, what's my role? The contribution, or what's my real role in this? And as a man, and I wasn't doing this back then, of course, but as a man, in other words, as someone that wants to embody healthy masculinity, am I leading the situation? Definitely not. And so I would just perpetuate more argument and more tension. And when I was pushed to my psychological, emotional, spiritual edge, I would just reenact what I grew up with, because that was familiar and the norm. And the ego loves familiarity. I'm not talking about the vanity side of the ego. I'm talking about the ego that identifies with its environment and with what gives it life and breath and structure.
You mentioned something, and I feel like this is a really potent question to always ask ourselves is, what's my role in this? Yeah.
I don't think as a society we do it enough. Definitely not. I'm pretty firm on that. I know for me, my personal experience, and even now, like for myself, and if I had to be brutally honest, it might take me a couple of steps or a minute before I get to the stage of stepping back and saying, what's my role? How am I contributing to this? Whereas, I still do that. I lunge at projection or lunge at, this is out of my control. Disempowering action, disempowering beliefs around what healthy power I have in the situation, because I'm choosing to react. It's just unconscious. Yeah. So can we choose to respond? And some of the tools that I use are really, really simple, like the power of pause or the power of 3 to 5 breaths. Close my eyes down, so I'm shutting down 70% of my stimulus at least by closing my eyes out and going internally and just breathing and asking some key questions such as, is this true right now? Or what's the outcome that I really want to experience from this? Or how am I showing up in this? Am I showing up in complete integrity? And that process can take anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds. It's not a big thing, but it's a game changer. And it starts bringing the responsibility to us. Sometimes I'll do some physical movement or have a cold shower, depending on the intensity of what I'm experiencing. I want to definitely make a physiological state change to begin to see and feel the situation for what it actually is, not the stories that we tell ourselves. And I've been in my life, so I've been so good at telling stories, and I've been a prisoner of my own mind in so many capacities. And freeing that is truly, truly liberating and expansive. It's shown up in my relationships and the way I am in the world just by doing that.
Yeah, I feel like we all have a program where we have the capacity to tell incredibly convincing stories.
Yeah, we're very good at it.
We're incredibly good at it. And inside of that as well, it almost brings in a story that I hear a lot of times is the fear of relationship, the fear of actually stepping into that for both men and women, and how oftentimes for a lot of the creatives or more of the entrepreneurs, they run a program where they start to overemphasize and overcompensate in business or in their success or in their creative field and try to distract themselves from the lack that they're feeling in not having that relationship.
The overcompensation piece is an interesting one, the mask, the avoidance. The avoidance of going deep into our own stuff and taking responsibility for who we are and just facing our pains and our fears. And we're so good at avoiding it all, whether it be alcoholism. For me, it was at different parts of my life. It was workaholism, alcoholism, sex, prostitution, womanizing, all of that, going into deep states of extreme fitness and really pushing my body. So I would forget about my pain. I would just be too exhausted to think about what was going on in my psyche. So many different distractions. Being excessively social, although I've been in solitude for a lot of my life, I would say, but I love being with people that are close to me, that I care about. But again, I wasn't using that for healthy intentions. I was using it to avoid and numb myself. And so, you see it in people that take drugs or, again, drink excessive alcohol or binge on television or whatever it may be, anything to avoid the true feelings of what's happening. It's the polarizing of self. We're so willing to feel the happy feelings, but we're so unwilling to feel the painful feelings. And that's a big part of our collective journey and our collective maturing as a society and as sentient beings on this planet.
This is a big one.
Hey, it's Dan here, and I'm popping in just to interrupt the show real quick to ask you a very important question. Are you a coach or a consultant with an existing business who's looking to increase your income, freedom, and impact, but without hustling 24/7, using icky sales tactics, or even trying another business strategy? If so, listen up, because I've got something very special for you. See, if you've been in business for a couple of years, you already know that you've got what it takes inside of you to be the badass coach who changes lives and creates time and financial freedom for themselves. But maybe it's not really happening as you would want it to right now. And maybe you've realized that it's not your business that needs work. You do. That, well, sometimes in order to get your business to grow, you need to grow. And that's really because success is 80% mindset and 20% mechanics. So when you're working on your business, that's your funnel and website and opt-in guide and all that other stuff. Well, that's just 20% of success. And maybe it's time to work on that 80%. Because when you get the right vision, mindset, skill set, and practices so that you can apply all of your potential to every single interaction you have with a prospect or client, even if it's online, so that they get magnetically drawn into you, so that they see, feel, and need your power and your value.
And that's how you enroll even more amazing clients at even higher rates and have them loving every single second of every experience with you. That's how you break through the invisible ceiling that maybe you've been bumping into, keeping you at the same income no matter how hard you've been working. And I want to give you the tools, techniques, and strategies that you need in order to build that mindset, in order to have that 80% in place so that you can create that time and financial freedom that you really want. And you can get all of that inside of my online mastermind community. It's called the Abundance Amplifier. And that's why I regularly drop the tools, processes, strategies, even live trainings for all the techniques that I use on the regular and that I teach all my private clients as well. You can get there by going to www.abundantcoaches.com. That's www.abundantcoaches.com. I can't wait to see you there.
For those of you that have been tuning in for a while, Dan and I will talk a lot about the ability to actually go and face that shadow and be willing to actually allow yourself to have the full range and the full spectrum of emotion. And it's a big piece because there tends to be a lot of fear that shows up when we look at the idea of facing some of those shadow aspects. And especially when we have somebody that reflects a lot of our shadows and can be very triggering for us, and recognizing like, whoa, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of self-judgment, or there's a lot of doubt that's coming up. Let me avoid instead of leaning in.
They're unpleasant. I call them undesirable states of being, or undesirable feelings, expressions, embodiments, whatever. But just because they're undesirable doesn't mean they're not useful. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not saying pursue doubt and fear and discomfort and jealousy and anger and rage and all of that. And if it's coming up in your life, there's a reason why. Suppressing it doesn't actually make it go away. It just makes it not visible for a temporary period of time. It makes it not seen, but it's always going to be felt in different ways. That's the substructures of our psyche and the way it works in terms of our unconscious, conscious, superconscious self. And the reality is that we've heard this before. I can't remember who said this, who started, but what we resist persists. Simple as that. I'm sure, I've heard Dr. John Demartini say that, and I don't know if he originated that idea, but it's been around for years. Essentially, that's the truth. And that's true on so many different levels of our being as well, physiologically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. What we resist persists. And so why would we resist something that can actually free us? Because it's so painful. And so we're very, very good as human beings at avoiding pain. What we tend to do is avoid pain and be hyper-hedonistic, which isn't healthy either. Now, some of the great sages say, he who actually sits on the top of the mountain and meditates for 50 years is not actually living a righteous path. And he who is engaged in such deep attachment and obsession to the material world, that's not necessarily the righteous path either. So there's a middle way. And then part of that middle way is being able to feel the fullness of who we are. That's something I didn't do. I avoided it a lot. And so I felt empty because I didn't have range in my beingness. I didn't have range in experiencing the fullness of life. I went to some serious depths of pain. I went to hell and back multiple times, and I've experienced bliss and joy, and I've experienced the collapsing of duality in my own personal experiences through breath work, through gratitude practice, through plant medicine, through different avenues. And that's completely changed the way I view the world, myself, reality, what consciousness is and is not, and the way I interact with myself and with others. And it's given me this reign. I'm no longer in avoidance. And so if I feel angry and upset, if I feel yucky and disconnected in myself, if I'm feeling angry, if I'm feeling frustrated, I deal with that. I own that. I embrace it. I don't judge it. I don't say to myself, I hate myself for feeling this. Why am I feeling this? I'm too busy. I need to be working on my business, or I need to be making love, or whatever it is that I'm doing. I sit with that. I stay with that. There's some value in that. There really, really is. And so I ask people, can you embrace the value of the difficulty? Can you embrace the value of the challenge? And if so, what is that value for you? What does it do for you? What does it give you? What does it show you? It's a beautiful place to be when we can embrace the discomfort without so much harsh critique and judgment.
Yeah, this is a big piece. And I feel it's where a lot of us have the opportunity to really lean in and to evolve, is in our willingness and our openness to lean into the uncomfortability of what is. Yeah.
Those are the questions I ask myself, and I still do. It's not, when I was speaking with a gentleman, a friend of mine, a few weeks ago, I was talking about this yesterday though, with someone, and we were having a conversation. In short, he said, we don't stop growing, and when we're dead, we stop growth. Growth stops when we die. And I'm like, yeah, it does. And so, again, I was listening to an audio this morning, and the Swami was saying around enlightenment, speaking to enlightenment from Advaita Vedanta from that perspective. And he was saying the enlightened person doesn't vanish or dematerialize. The enlightened person continues to live life. They're still part of this life. They're still exposed to the elements that life brings. It's just how they relate to it is very different. They know with every fibrous aspect of their being that this and that is that. It's a philosophical disposition. It's irrelevant what it is. But they continue living the life. And so we never stop growing because we have some massive realization. I feel that I've touched God and I've been God many times through different journeys, internal journeys that I've had. That doesn't mean that my life now stopped. That it's an experience that can feed into my reality and how I choose to be in the world. I think that's very important for us to remember, and really important for us to grasp as well, that we are always growing. So, because sometimes we live in this fantasy, and I know I did this for a long time. And to be brutally honest, even now, although I do remember years ago, I would be crying and screaming, when is this going to end? I don't think that's the healthy question to ask. I've done that so many times. I don't think that's the right question to ask, because when I stopped asking that question and I legitimately surrendered and opened my whole self up, and I said, you know what? I'm not attached to the outcome. Mental asylum, suicide, pain, alone for the rest of my life, whatever. Take me where you need to take me. Now, when I was talking to myself, I was talking to some unseen, unknown force. I was just talking. Just take me where you got to take me. And literally, the moment I really owned that and really spoke that with truth and expressed that with truth was the moment everything started to unravel and I started to feel freedom. And so asking when is this going to end, I don't think is the right question. At least it's been my experience. And so there's so much power in that embracing, so much power.
You bring up such a relevant topic right now. For I know a lot of the people just experiencing just the collective energy when there's this theme of surrender. Very juicy topic in both for men and for women, and just learning how to surrender to the evolution and the transmutation that's really happening right now in our species. And really this shift of what it feels like, where for so long we've been leading with this masculine energy and this masculine presence. And there's a shift happening collectively where the feminine is starting to actually take lead in how we show up in the world.
So surrender is a beautiful space. It's a beautiful expression. It's a feminine expression. And our world at large is, yes, relatively speaking, we live in the safest times we ever have in terms of the warmongering that's not occurring, the levels of health that we're experiencing as a collective society. When you look at the statistics, we live in the safest, healthiest time ever. Modern medicine, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so much change, and there's been so much hypermasculinity, unhealthy expressions of masculinity in the world, that the feminine is scared to come through. Surrendering, especially for men, because men see surrendering as a weakness. Men perceive surrendering just like vulnerability as a weakness. And the reality is, I've done a lot of work. Brene Brown speaks to this as well, which is really interesting. But I've done a great deal of work with special forces soldiers, elite guys. And the reality is they're engaging in vulnerability all the time. If you go by Brene Brown's definition of what's required to be vulnerable, which is risk-taking, experiencing elements of the unknown and emotional volatility. That's vulnerability. Well, guess what? As an elite soldier, you're experiencing that consistently. So you're being vulnerable. So they have this practice of vulnerability, just contextually it's different. This notion of surrendering, especially men perceive it to be weak because it opens them up. They can't trust. How can they trust when collectively they feel that there's been oppression in the world and they're seen in a particular way and they see themselves in a particular way and they think that others are seeing them in a particular way? And there's just so much convolution around that we're not stepping into surrender. Women don't feel safe enough to do that. So the feminine is like, stop, start, and there's rigidity in that. And so what we're doing is we're just creating these chasms and more isolation. And we're not realizing it until, not that we're too far in, but it's too noticeable. And then it takes so much energy to come back into that. But there are some amazing warriors out there, light warriors, that are saying, you know what? Fuck this. I'm surrendering and I'm going to be me. And I know that leaves me open. And I'm okay with that. enough to do it and enough to be it. I'm going to light the path, and if I don't, that's okay. And if I get hurt, that's okay too. And so I admire and really honor those people that are doing that.
Yeah.
And being that.
I think the piece that'll tie this back into, just bring everything full circle, is how in relation especially, it's the process of surrender in order to really show up in our full open-heartedness and to really show up in our wholeness. And you do see very much this game at play, to say the least. And oftentimes it's where the feminine is almost feels very unsafe to fully surrender and to fully give their heart in full expression to a man for whatever the wounding may be. And in the same sense, it's almost like for a lot of the more masculine presence, there's a fear of being fully present because there's that fear around that lack of freedom or that loss of freedom.
Men need to step into their vertical presence. They need to, I call it verticality. They need to step into their physical posture. They need to be literally physically upright in their being. They need to demonstrate safety through consistency. And they need to be certain and clear in their directives in the way they show up. So women, or the feminine, can, outside of themselves, can surrender. Surrendering is just trusting. Surrendering is just being open and being honest. Surrendering is being vulnerable, and it is being very, very open and transparent. Surrendering, we're pro-social beings, we're relational beings. And so saying, hey, I would really like your help, or I need your guidance, or I would appreciate, rather than saying need your guidance, I would appreciate your guidance, or I would appreciate if you show up for me, or I'm going to say something to you and it's really hard for me to say because I'm scared of what the outcome may be or how you were going to be, but I'm going to surrender and be open to that. And men need to show up in that. And the role of the feminine is to meet the men or meet the masculine outside of herself with compassion and non-judgment. I know in my own personal experience, when I've been met by the feminine with compassion and non-judgment, my growth has accelerated massively. And that only makes me a better human for every single person I come into contact with. I wouldn't be here today. There's many reasons why I wouldn't be here today, but one of the key reasons is because I was met with compassion and non-judgment, two key characteristics and virtues, from women that could see me for who I was and saw beyond the superficiality or saw beyond the action, saw the core essence of me and didn't judge me in that. And I was able to free myself so deeply in those moments. And that's direct experience that I'm speaking from. And I see it all the time when a woman meets her man, just to use man-woman terms, when she meets her man with compassion, non-judgment, and he's got to be sincere. Like, he can't keep repeating the same choices that are causing harm and pain to the relationship, to himself and to her. She can still keep meeting him with compassion, non-judgment, because that's going to serve her and forgiveness, but she can also still set healthy boundaries and say, that's another conversation. But I'm talking about all things being equal here for a moment in terms of people are showing up in sincerity. And we're going to make choices that hurt ourselves and others because we're human. And the more we meet each other with that love and that compassion, that non-judgment and that present, for men particularly, that present, penetrating presence, we're healing, we're growing, we're accelerating our expansion into ourselves, into new ways of being in the world that become the new normal.
Yeah, it's a visceral response for those of you that are listening but can't see the video. Such a beautiful shift that I feel is just happening for so many of us, in really leaning into this possibility of accepting the idea and the possibility and the probability that more than likely we're going to be human and we're going to cause pain and there's going to be hurt, but it's not coming from an ill-willed place, and that's not the intention we're setting. It's part of that expansive experience, and it's creating that container and relationship where we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and allow ourselves to fully experience the depth and the capacity of, I'm going to experience this incredible love, and it's also possible that I may experience this incredible pain, but allowing yourself to fully open to that possibility so that you can truly expand.
Yeah. I love what you just said, allowing yourself the possibility of that. And this is really tough for men, and I will speak on behalf of men, is that receiving aspect, which is a feminine trait. Giving is masculine per se. I've struggled to receive a lot in my life because of issues of not being worthy, not feeling worthy. Not that I'm not being worthy. Every single person's worthy. Not feeling worthy, not perceiving myself to be worthy. So I've struggled to receive gifts, people, wisdom, love, all of that. I've really struggled to receive it fully, and honestly, with how it's given. And that's been a big lesson for me, is receiving. And it still is to some extent. It really still is. But I'm so much better at it now. It's a big pain point for men because there's so many reasons why. One of them is when we're seen to be receiving, we have this perception that we're inadequate. So we have to receive from someone else because we can't do it ourselves, because there's this ideology, this collective ideology that's perpetuated in society, that men need to know everything. They need to do everything. They need to have everything in order. That's not how it fucking works. When you go back a few 100,000 years in tribes, there were groups of men, 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever, and each one had a specific skill. Each one had mastery in a certain area of survivability for that tribe. One would maybe be to expand the perimeter in the safest way. One would be to make tools. One would be to hunt. One would need to lead the pack when hunting, whatever it was for survivability. And that's in our DNA. Physiologically, that's part of who we are. And so this thing that the lone wolf it's a fallacy. It doesn't exist. If you were isolated from your tribe, you were dead. Within minutes or hours, you're done. It was strength in numbers. And that still applies today in so many different ways. Otherwise, why are you and I having this conversation? We're not hermits. Why we're having this conversation? Because we're serving a group of people that are interested in listening to what we have to say. We're all helping each other in different ways. The people that are listening, the fact that we know there's an audience there, allows us to have this conversation, which refines our thoughts and ideas and feelings and connection to each other. And we go away from that and go, wow, I had a really great conversation with Sophie today. And it brought up a couple of things. I'm going to go deeper into that. And then all of a sudden I'm growing. Then I bring that wisdom into my friend or into my partner or into my father, whatever it may be. And so we're all connected. And this fallacy that men have to do things on their own. And that's been perpetuated as well in society for women. The boss babe entrepreneur doing it all on her own. No, you can't do it on your own. The fact that anything that's great, that's achieved in greatness, is in conjunction with other people, whether it's direct or indirect. And so we put so much pressure on ourselves to do everything on our own. It doesn't work, and it just causes further isolation. Definitely be an entrepreneur and definitely do your thing in the world, and know that you can ask for help. Know that you can ask help. And look, again, to be brutally honest, it's part of me projecting my own ideologies and belief out into the world when I say that, because it's been my experience that I haven't asked enough. And because I haven't asked enough, it's set me back in the world. That's my experience. If that resonates with you, take it, run with it. If not, that's cool. Do your thing. Defy social psychology and social constructs and sociology and anthropology, and deny our basic physiology, and just keep doing your thing. In my passive aggressive tone, I'm teasing. But we have to go through that, right? So if you like, I had to go through it. I'm sure we have to be highly individuated to know that, I'm thinking I'm a little bit too much of an individual. Let me come back into more of a sacred social space again. What does that look like for me? And it's different for everyone.
To just tie everything back together, and obviously just being conscious of time as well, is really looking at how all of this shows up, and then what it feels like, kind of just summarizing everything that we've dropped in on, because we've covered quite a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have. I was thinking about that actually a moment ago.
It's sounding like really the depth of all of this is allowing ourselves to fully open our hearts, number one, to ourselves, and be willing to dive into the depth of our emotional capacity and really see ourselves in both our light and our shadow. And through that process, be willing to step into relationship, whether it be intimate or just through friendship or any type of relationship, where we then can see that as a mirror for ourselves of where we get to evolve and expand. And then through that process, we are able to collectively expand the rest of the collective conscious.
I love that. I love everything you've just said. I really resonate with that. Yeah.
And so I feel the last question that's really coming to mind is, for those that are in that place right now where they're really seeking and they're craving that deep intimacy, that deep level of connection, and perhaps they've had experience thus far where it has yet to fully manifest in the capacity to which they feel fully met or fully seen. Obviously, a big part of this is them allowing themselves to be fully seen. What would you say to either the man or the woman who's in that place where they're craving that deep level of intimacy, that deep level of expansion, that sacred union, and what it would look like to actually cultivate that?
I'll come back full circle to what we've been speaking to, is seeing yourself. Really generate that intimacy within you. See it within yourself. That entails, when I say come back full circle, that entails embracing the dark, the light, the seen, the unseen, the known, the unknown, just all aspects of you, and really being proud of that. That's the next step, is can you be proud of all that? Because it's actually, and there's a process that unravels itself in, but can you be proud and honored around who you've been, everything that you've been? Can you see the gratitude and feel, more importantly, the gratitude and the value of everything that you've experienced? And that level of intimacy, seeing yourself from that place, that's powerful. You know, we want these quick fixes in the world. We want others to take away our pain. We want others to see us for who we are, and we can just behave how we want and be how we want. And we have this, so many of us have this unrealistic expectation. And the truth of it is that when we do that, we're being highly codependent. And that's an unhealthy relational state. Interdependent is different. And that's grounded in equity, and that's grounded in self-responsibility and ownership. And it's grounded in a place of wanting to give and receive love from health. Health meaning that there's transparency there. We're not coming from wounding and old pain and old fear. We've looked at our old stuff and we've embraced it and we've loved ourselves for it. And that level of intimacy, when you experience that with yourself, everything else is icing on the cake. And the intimacy outside of you per se, it shows itself beautifully.
This is just coming through right now, so I'm going to just drop in on it.
Yeah.
The piece that's coming up is around sexual sovereignty and the movement that's really taking place right now collectively, especially with the more feminine energy of really embodying this ability to take full responsibility for our own sexual sovereignty, and instead of being dependent on a partner, and really allowing ourselves to embody more of that sensuality and that sexuality, and through the practice of self-pleasure or with a partner, either or, where we're able to actually create this deep sense of intimate connection with ourselves, which then allows us to show up so much more fully in relation with someone else.
I love that. And that's been, we could talk about this for a long time, but that's been part of my journey as well, sexual sovereignty, and really coming into healthier expressions of sexuality. Because for me, sexuality is more than just the act of sex. It's sexual projection, it's life force energy, it's integrated in personality. This is a long conversation. Sex is more than just the act or the magic of the movement of sexual intercourse itself. It is that and so much more. And the sexual projection piece and the life force piece, that's so loaded. I really unpack a lot of this in the work I do with men, in the programs that I have. I have a whole principle on sexuality. It's a big one.
Yeah, it sounds like we might have to do another episode.
Yeah, happy to do that. Love it.
Love it. Well, just being conscious of time and obviously wanting to honor you in your space. Thank you so much for tuning in. For anyone listening that's really resonated with you or your content, how can they learn more about you and what you do and just connect with you?
Of course, yeah. So thank you so much. stefanossafandos.com and any of my social media handles, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Twitter, whatever. They're all there. Stefanos Safandos. Yeah.
Wow. Love it. Beautiful. And then anything lastly that you want to share as we wrap up here?
I would just say, firstly, thank you for listening and making the time out of your day to listen to whoever's listening to this. And of course, just be really willing to look at the hard stuff and feel the difficult stuff. There's a lot of value in that. I know it's scary at the beginning, and just stay there long enough to get the value. And there's definitely a process for that, and that can be a podcast for another time. But just be really willing to up-level your life. And that involves so many different things, so many different elements.
Love it. Amazing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, if you did, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment, send us a message on Instagram. We love hearing from you. Otherwise, I cannot wait to see you all on the next episode. Bye, guys.